All right. So today, I'm speaking a little bit about trust. You got a little glimpse of that, but I wanted to kind of to fully convey my the title for my message. I thought I'd do it in a kind of a unique way, and I wanted to play this video to kind of emphasize what we're going to be talking about today.
Lauren's going to catch you. Trust fall. Okay, trust fall. Ready, set, go.
So a few years back, my nieces and nephews really got into trust fall. I don't know what age it was. They were just all about trust falls, and they hadn't seen that video. So they were doing a different thing though. They would just run up to me and be like, trust fall, and just fall back, and I'd have to miraculously catch them, which is a crazy amount of trust. So the one day I went to my niece and I was like, trust fall, and I fell forward like that, and then she was terrified. She was like, what did you do? Why did you do that? And I was like, it's a little fun time. But yes, we're talking about trust. In the real world, trust can be broken. Just like that little girl in the video. I'm sure she didn't trust her family after that. But trust can be betrayed in relationships. Things are messy. It can lead to disappointment and to us never trusting again. And so today the title of my message is called Trust plus Faith equals Truth. And hopefully that'll make a little bit of sense by the end of it. And I couldn't have gone with a more classic verse on trust. I realized this morning, that I'm pretty sure this is one of the first 5 groups of passage that I had to memorize as a kid. I think it went the Lord's Prayer, Psalms 23, and then I'm pretty sure this was the third one, if I remember correctly, that I had to memorize as a kid. And so the passage is Proverbs 3, starting in verse 5 and 6, and it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Like I said, it's the classic trust the Lord verse. And today I wanted to kind of break it down a little bit further, and we're really just going to focus on the 4 aspects of this one. So George, if you go to the next slide, we're going to be focusing on those 4 things. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And we're going to kind of dissect those 4 little areas a little bit more. So let's go with the first one. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. First off, that we just need to hear that at the beginning of a year. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. That just needs to be our anthem going into this new year. So what do we think of when we hear this? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. I know the first thing that comes to my mind is faith. And I love that because trust and faith are almost synonymous. The perfect example that I can give is on a wedding day in marriage when they do their vows. There's such a heavy amount of faith and trust in that moment when you make that commitment. It's like I'm putting everything on you. I'm going to just step out in faith and completely trust that everything's going to be okay, even though we don't know that there's going to be hard times. That we don't know if our spouse might have medical issues or anything like that. We just completely trust that no matter what happens, we're going to have each other. And it takes a tremendous amount of faith to do that. And so I wanted to address a misconception about faith. See, some say people need amounts of faith to receive benefits from God. I've actually come across this in a lot of different scenarios. And so let me address this first. I'm not saying that we don't need faith. And in context of healing and things like that, obviously faith plays a very vital role. But I'm talking about when people kind of use faith in the really wrong way. and it literally turns into, we're the faith-filled club. And it says, if I have enough faith, God will heal me. I wouldn't have lost the house if I had enough faith. My marriage would still be intact if I had more faith. Maybe God would bless me more if I trusted him more. And it's me. And it literally takes this amazing, beautiful thing about God and makes it about ourselves. See, this type of thinking turns trust and faith into a gauge. It's like a meter in which we judge ourselves. It's a faithometer. I'm going to start selling those on Amazon. It's just a watch. It's the faithometer. It'll be the new version of the mood ring. That's a great idea. So it's a win-win business idea right there. I literally just thought of that. I'm so happy. See, when we start using a faithometer, we'll often say, God loves me more because I have more faith and trust a whole lot more than those people. We always have those people in our mind. See, this type of thinking, it is self-absorbed and narcissistic. It forces us to only think about ourselves and to judge ourselves. Do I believe enough? Am I sure enough? And do I know the right things? It's like, I've even met people who are like, oh, I trust God a whole lot more because I know these certain passages by heart. And it's not true. That's making it about us. See, it takes faith and trust that was supposed to be centered on Jesus, and it becomes centered on ourselves. This is idolatry. It's flat out idolatry because it takes the glory, it takes the honor, it takes the awe off of God and puts it on us. See, a person's life, their worth, their identity should not come from ourselves, but from God. And when we start using a faithometer or a trustometer, it makes it about us. See, we need faith to trust. We encounter that on our relationships on a daily basis. And faith is covenantal trust. Let me say that again. Faith is covenantal trust. I'm going to use a marriage example a lot today, just as a heads up. See, the closer you are to someone, the more you can trust them. And I know when we talk about that like a human-to-human context, that is scary because that means they got a lot more ammunition to be able to really hurt you. But see, God is not human with selfish desires who has any ideas about how to hurt you or wanting to hurt you. See, the more you have faith that they will be there for you, the more you trust them in the harder situations. That's how marriage works. That's why one of the main vows in marriage is in sickness and in health. It's like when things are great, it's really easy to trust. But when things are total garbage, are you still going to be able to trust? Are you still going to have that faith? So if you are far from your spouse, if you're miles away, how can you trust them? In the same way, if you are far from the Lord, how can we have greater trust in Him and even more faith? See, if you feel like you need to trust God more, if that's something that's like you need a little dose of in your life, the answer is not to judge ourselves or beat ourselves up. The answer is to have more relationship with Him. It's actually pretty easy. It's not this whole thing where we just like beat ourselves up and judge ourselves and make it about us. It's simply just focusing more on our relationship with God. That means spending more time with Him. That means getting to know Him. That means being in His Word, just like Daquan talked about a couple of weeks ago. Being in the Word. It means giving Him all of our heart. It really just means to go after more relationship with him. It's not about us and what we need. It's actually all about God. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see." That is a lot harder to do when we talk about it in the context of a human-to-human relationship. But when we have the God of all creation, the God who knows everything, the God who created us and knows every cell, every hair on our head, it's going to be a lot easier to just pursue him. And that's all it is. We just got to focus on him. It says, husbands, if you're focusing on your wives and you're pursuing them, does that not make your relationship just a little bit easier? Does that make sense? Ashley's nodding her head. She's like, uh-huh. So the next part is lean not on your own understanding. Lean not on your own understanding. See, this passage is not telling us to be fools or lazy or unmotivated. Often I found that this part of the passage gets simply branded as not doubting. Just don't doubt. Don't doubt. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And I kind of want to emphasize the meaning in this, because it goes a lot further than just simply not doubting. Okay? This passage is telling us to not rob God of his glory. It's not just simply doubting. It is not robbing God of his glory. For example, when something really cool happens or something amazing and God really comes through for us, we can often start to dissect it. We can be like, oh, like was that really that? Was that an angel? Did God really heal my chronic pain, or was I just kind of having a good day because it wasn't too cold out or it wasn't too hot out, or whatever variable for that pain is? It can often manifest as, did God really part the Red Sea, or was there a tsunami that day? See, when we trust God, we don't want to explain away the amazing ways he takes care of us. We don't want to explain away. So when we trust God with all of our heart, it's so that we can remember him, we can give him praise, we can give him honor and glory. And so I like to add something. So in that verse, trust God with all your heart. I want to submit to you, let's add just one little thing to make the second part mean something a little bit more. Trust God with all your heart. And when something amazing happens, lean not on your own understanding. I actually had something happen this past week, and it was super weird because I was like, I need like a really good like analogy, and got through one right on me, and I was like, oh, okay, whoa. But I went to go pick up my kids from my sister's house. She was watching the kids when I was doing some work, and I went to go pick them up, and it was that day where it was really cold and kind of snowy, and so I was like, oh, I'm going to leave the car on. I'm just going to run in really quick, and I'll grab them. Apparently, in my rush, I forgot a very valuable part of the car, which is called the park. Okay, so I hop out of the car. I run inside. It's kind of chaos because I got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. You know, it's kind of crazy. And so I'm like trying to wrangle them all. I'm trying to get all their stuff. My cousin, or my boys' cousins, my nieces and nephews, they're like, Uncle Drew, they're giving me hugs. They're trying to play. As I'm putting their coats on, they're taking coats off. I'm like, this is crazy. And everything's just kind of mad. I finally get everything together. I pick up Zane, got Rylan by the hand. I walk out the door, and let me back up a second. The garage door, we were walking out the garage. So as I walk up there, the car is a good 10 feet farther and is right up against the house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did like one of the teenage hooligans like drive my car and crash it? Like that was the thing that I thought in my head, not that I forgot to put it in park. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I'm like freaking out. And I go and I immediately jump in the car and I pull it back a hair and I put it in park and I'm just like freaking out. And so I'm looking and I look at the car and the van was hanging inside the garage, quite a significant distance. Okay? And praise the Lord, the garage door was up when I got there. So the garage door is fine. My brother-in-law's BMW is parked in that spot. Now, my brother-in-law, and I've been at his house a lot, there's like this much room between his BMW and the door most of the time. Because he likes to walk around the front. He doesn't walk around the back. He walks around the front because it's always dry, there's less snow, whatever, all that stuff. And for whatever reason, we talked about this. That day, he pulled in further. He was like a good foot in. Okay? You can check my bumper. I have no scrape on. There's rust on it. That has nothing to do with it. But there's no scrape on my bumper because the place in which I hit the house, I actually didn't hit the house. I ran into a very flexible, very plastic, ginormous flower pot. Thank God my sister loves ginormous flower pots. And all it did was I slowly squished the flower pot. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to buy my sister like a new, I don't know how much these ginormous flower pots are, but I can't imagine they're like $10. But I was like, oh, at least like all I have to do is buy her a flower pot. The flower pot isn't even broken. It bent back in the exact same position and none of the paint chipped off. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, thank you, God. like I cannot calculate maybe I should have bought a lottery ticket that day. I don't know. But I cannot calculate. And all that is in that situation where I just trust God, maybe a little bit too much in that moment, where I was just completely taken care of by God. And instead of being like, okay, well, the car wasn't moving very fast because we're at this angle, and the garage door, blah, 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 and like try and just explain away all the things that happened, that went into making this happen. Instead, I was just like, thank you, God, that I don't have to pay for my brother-in-law's BMW to get fixed. Or their house, or our car. Or the flower pot. I was happy to pay for a flower pot. When I walked on there, I was like, oh my gosh, my heart just like fell out of my body. It was just like, oh no. But see, lean not on your own understanding does not mean we shouldn't have wisdom and discernment. You know, like putting a car in park. It's a really good example. Or, you know, like buying insurance. Health insurance, life insurance, car insurance, all those things. Or, you know, locking our doors at night and remembering to close our garage doors. And so I want to take a second to help us understand, lean not on our own understanding a little bit more. I want to talk about diligence versus understanding. See, Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance and advantage. But everyone who acts in haste comes surely to poverty. See, I can trust my wife with all my heart, but if I am not diligent at pursuing her, loving her, connecting with her, it's going to be really hard for her to trust me. That's the same way it goes with God. If we are not diligent in what we're doing with God, in our relationship with God, if we're not being diligent in the way that we are managing ourselves, if we're not diligent in how we manage ourselves, our lives are going to be a little chaotic. It's going to make it a little bit harder to have time and have that relationship with God. So there is a benefit to being diligent in managing our time well, because we can more successfully give it to God. See, God is our provider and He takes care of us. But we don't need to try and make it harder for Him. If we're needing to pay bills, we need to get a job. That makes sense. I've met a lot of people that are just like, oh, well, I'm just going to trust God and He'll figure it out. I'm like, well, that's good. And I've run into some people who are like, oh, I don't have the ability to work. And I get that. But I know a lot of people who have amazing testimonies where they're in situations like that, where they not only are just trusting and putting all their trust in God and just leaning on Him, but they're also diligently seeking a solution as well. That they're diligently being like, okay, well, I can't work. What are ways that I can't work a normal job. What are ways in which I can do this? And they get creative about it. And most of the time when that happens, when a person is in need and they trust God and they put their faith in God and then they're diligent about it, God normally reveals the solution to them. If not, but just provides amazing for them in blessing them. My favorite stories are when somebody are in need and they're like, I'm in need, I want to trust God, and they start diligently do something, and then all of a sudden a miraculous check shows up in their mailbox and they get a job in the same day. Because that's how God takes care of us. True. Faith without works is dead. Boom. Not my words. Ashley. It's the same thing for budgeting. See, we plan for what we can and trust God for what we can't. And so I'm going to kind of use a savers versus spenders to kind of emphasize diligence and not leaning on our own understanding. See, I'm a saver, so I'm gonna kind of like talk about this about myself. But savers, when we think about finances, when we're planning, and I'm going to use finances because it's a good example, but this applies to a lot of life things. But savers, we're like, oh man, we gotta save all the pennies. We got to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to be prepared for whatever weird scenario or car accident or changing tires or medical problem. We got to make sure that we're paying for all the insurances, every type of thing. We're constantly in this tension-filled world of gotta be prepared, gotta be prepared, gotta be prepared. And then we got the spenders over here, okay? And they're like, yay, it's payday! And then something horrible happens, and they're like, oh no, what do I do? What is insurance? I'm kidding, that's a little dramatic, obviously. But what I've seen is that most savers have a really hard time trusting God. Because it's like, I got to have this control. I got to do this thing. I got to make sure I'm constantly doing things. I'm locking all the doors. I'm doing all the things. And they have no trust in God. And so when you try and say, hey, just trust the Lord, they're just like, but I can't. And they just want to hold on to all the things. And they are stressed out beyond belief. And the spenders, they're generally pretty relaxed and chilled. And it's really great for them. But then when the things do go bad, they don't know how to do the exact same thing, which is trust God. And then they're completely overwhelmed and completely stressed out because they kind of spent a lot of time not preparing and not being diligent about the very little things. So even the smallest thing that goes wrong is extremely stressful, and then it's really hard to trust God. And it doesn't matter if you're on either end of the spectrum. The issue is that you're having a hard time trusting God and you're being stressed out. And there's an amazing balance in leaning not in our own understanding and being diligent. It's just this little place in the middle of balance where God brings abundance and blessing, not just financially, in relationships, in work, in all these different areas where we just completely put our trust in God. But we're planning and we're actively being diligent about the things that He's giving us. And we're stewarding the things correctly. God can bless us even more. And He'll give us even more because He knows we can handle it. It takes both. God doesn't just give things to the spenders or the savers. He does give them, sorry, let me step back. He gives it to them. But He can grow us even more when we have that balance in the middle. Because He knows we have the faith and the relaxation, but He knows we're also diligent. See, not leaning on our own understanding is when we are in decision-making time to not leave God out of it. The same way we do with our spouses. Guys, have you ever tried making plans without talking to your wife? It's not a good plan, right? It's not a smart idea. See, if I go to the store and I want to buy some extra chocolate, that's not going to raise any red flags. But if I leave the house and go buy a car, that might be an issue. See, if we are building covenantal trust through a relationship with God, we will be in tune with what God desires for our lives. We're going to be in tune with that. It's not like we're going to be distant. If me and B are not on the same page, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go buy a car, she's going to be like, what the heck are you doing? But if we're in tune, I'll be like, hey, honey, I think we need to be planning for the future. I think this car's going to die. I ran into a house again. It's no good. We're going to have to like go get a new car. She's like, yeah, I'm on the same page, but let's get like an extra brake or something in there. There's that relationship, and it's the same thing. When we're able to have that connection, have that relationship with God, making those decisions, he's just naturally going to be a part of them. It takes the stress off of us because it's like, hey, God, in your infinite wisdom, what do you think I should do? Water break. Hold on. I always forget to bring this water bottle up. I'm just going to duct tape one to the stage. It'll look beautiful. just like a necklace? That would be perfect. Just a water bottle necklace. I'll be so cool. And the hipsters will love it. All right. The next part that we're going to go through is submit to him. See, to trust God better, we have to submit to him. The definition of submit is to accept or yield to a superior force or the authority or the will of another person. See, to submit often gets associated with oppression. It can be taken like way out of context, and it really has in our society. We're all Americans here. Well, most of us. And that's right. She is. We're Americans here. And from the start of our country, we have a little bit of an issue with submitting to an authority. It's kind of in our nature. So when we often think about submitting, it's always seen as this oppressive superiority kind of complex. And it's really hard to think about submission in a loving way or in a worshiping way to God. It gets taken out of context all the time. A lot like how Ephesians 5:22 is often taken out of context when it says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands. This is a classic verse. This one's taken out all the time. And it sounds, just that verse on its own, it can be used to sound sexist, and it's often been used to justify husbands mistreating and abusing their wives. It's been misused a ton. Taken in context, if you read the entire chapter and you take everything into the context, this passage depicts an amazing marriage, an amazing relationship between a husband and wife. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. See, the husband in this scenario has an elevated expectation of loving his wife so well, so faithfully, so perfectly, that it creates trust so strong that the wife does not feel oppressed, but secure and empowered. Submission based on love brings peace and harmony to a home. See, when me and Bianca have an argument, when Bianca and I fixed it. See, I did good there. When Bianca and we talked about that a couple Sundays ago. So, boom, fixed it. When Bianca and I have an argument, I can trace almost all of them to one of us, meaning me, selfishly putting my needs before hers. Almost all of our arguments can really easily be narrowed down to that. See, if we, the church, are the bride, wouldn't that make Christ the perfect groom or husband? And since we know he is perfect and only wants the best for us, we don't have room to feel oppressed. He only wants the best for us. That leaves no room for oppression. I lost my spot. Hold on one second. And so since we know this, it will be even easier to submit to him and obey him willingly. See, God is not the humans that broke our trust. God is not the one that betrayed us. He's not the one that hurt us. So when we go to him in our decision-making time, when we go to him because we're at a crossroad, we need to remember that he is not oppressing us and that we need to obey him willingly. Obedience is a little bit hard sometimes. So John 14:23 says, Jesus replied, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Anyone who has covenantal trust, anyone who has a connected relationship will obey my teaching. So if we take that first part, anyone who loves me is literally saying anyone who has covenantal trust, anyone who has connected relationship will obey me. The mere fact of obeying Christ, obeying God, comes out of covenantal, deep relationship. And then that's the last part of the verse. And it says, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Again, submission based on love brings peace and harmony to a home, because when we submit to God in a loving way and when we feel that love, it is so calm that God's presence, his very spirit, can rest in us and make our home peaceful because we know we have submitted to him. We know we are obeying him and doing exactly what we need to be doing because we have all of our trust in him. All right, now the last section is he will make your path straight. And so I was trying to, when I got this, and I was like, what is the best way I can convey this last piece of the passage? And I think I can't say it better, so I'm going to let this guy, Bill Engvall, said it better when he said, here's your sign. You know that comedian? Here's your sign. So when we trust God and he shows up and it gives us more faith, which makes us glorify him more, making it easier to submit to him, which leads to our path being straight, and the cycle continues. There's your sign. Trust works. When we put our trust in God and it happens, there's your sign. And so I know the title of this message is Truth plus Faith equal, or Trust plus Faith equals truth. And the truth is, having more trust in God is why Christ died on the cross for us. So we can trust God with all of our hearts, which leads to more relationship with him. The truth is, Christ died on the cross for us so we can lean not on our own understanding and give him honor and glory when he shows up for us. Christ died on the cross for us so we don't feel oppressed when we have to submit and obey him, because we have a covenant trust, a covenant relationship with him. He died on the cross so our paths can be made straight, so we can follow him into salvation, into heaven. That's the truth. Jesus died on the cross so that we can have more connection with him. We can have that relationship eternally with the Father. And I really just felt really drawn to talk about trust today because we got a new year ahead of us. And we just got to completely trust him. And that's it. Amen. So let's stand and let's just pray over the areas of our lives where we need more trust.